Welcome back to our next video in our series on the falling object game. In this video we're going to be looking at how to add in more of those falling objects and tweaking a few settings here. So hopefully you've been enjoying these videos. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then I would recommend that you do so that you can get notification when videos come up as we continue to learn more about game design and making games. So let's go in Unity, and so right now we have one of these falling objects here that just falls and kind of loops around on the screen, which isn't real challenging or difficult. Pretty easy to dodge and not get hit and shoot that one coming down. So let's set this up so we can have more. So first thing, since we've got this one all set up how we like it for now, let's make it into a prefab. And once it's a prefab, then we can drag out multiples of these and they'll all act the same and be set up the same way. So to make a prefab, we're just going to drag him from the hierarchy down into the asset panel here and drop him. So now our falling object is down here as a prefab in our project panel. And again, you noticed he turned blue up here in the hierarchy, which means that he's a prefab. Now that we have him in here as a prefab, I can actually drag out multiple copies of him. So I can just drag out a whole bunch of these guys. Let's see, what is that, 7? Let's try 7 for now and see how that feels. And let's just hit play, and let's just see how these start feeling as they come down around. We should start getting a little more randomness here now as they are resetting and starting to move at different speeds. Now, you notice an interesting problem that we had there. When two of those falling objects just collided with each other, they caused each other to explode. So we can either leave that in as a feature of the game, or we can just make it so that they ignore each other and we allow them to pass through each other. So that's a decision that we have to make. So if you do want them to just hit and explode each other, you can leave it the way it is. If you would like them to be able to pass through each other, then we have to go into the script for the falling object and make some changes. So in the falling object script, in the on trigger enter, right now we're checking if it's a bullet, we're destroying it, the bullet, and we're scoring points. If it's the player, we're telling the player to lose a life, and in every case we're causing an explosion to happen, and we're destroying that explosion and repositioning to the top. If we want to have these falling objects ignore each other, then we're going to have to do a check here to see if it was a falling object that we hit, and if it was, then we're going to not want to do this part here. Okay, so a couple of ways we could do that. First thing would be to set up a tag on our falling objects so that we know when we hit it that it's a falling object. So let's go out into Unity and let's add a tag to our falling object. So I'm gonna find the prefab down here. If I add the tag to the prefab, then these copies up here will all get it. So let's go here. Let's add a brand new tag. Let's hit the plus sign in the tag manager so we can do a new one. And let's just call this our falling object. Okay, so now we have a tag made. Let's go back to our falling object here and assign that tag, falling object, right there. And if I go out now and look at my objects out here in the hierarchy, you notice how all of them have the falling object tag. So when I make a change to the prefab down here, all these guys up here get the change automatically. Alright, so we've got these guys tagged. In our script then, what we could do is we could do a check before we explode and destroy this guy and move it to the top. We could just check to see if it was a falling object we hit, and if it wasn't a falling object, then we would do all this. But if it is a falling object, we wouldn't. So here's one way we could do this. Let's move this down, actually keep that together. Let's just move that down. So check to see if the other object was not a falling object before explosion happens here. Okay, so we're going to do an if statement here, and what we're going to do is we're going to say if other dot compare tag. So same thing that we've been doing before. This time it was a falling object. Now this asks if, let's put the some brackets around all the stuff that we want to have happen. Now this just says if it is a falling object, then do all this. Well, what we want to actually find out if it's not a falling object. So what you can do is in front of other dot compare tag, we can put an exclamation point. Exclamation point in C# here means not. So now they're saying if not other compare tag falling object. So basically, if this comes back as false, okay, so if this is not tagged as a falling object, then we're going to do all this. Okay, if it is a falling object, then we're not going to do all this. So that will make it so that when falling objects hit each other, they'll just won't react at all. They'll just pass right through each other, and that's fine. Okay, if it's anything else that we touched, so anything that doesn't have this tag, then it will explode, clean up the explosion, and move itself to the top. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Remember, exclamation point means not. Okay, so let's test that out to see if they overlap each other or not. So, okay, there we had one overlap, there we had some touch, so it's now ignoring that. Now, let's see what happens if I let one hit me. You notice how I didn't get the explosion and how I got an error down here. Let's try to shoot one. That one actually worked, but see how I'm hitting a lot of these? And the bullet's disappearing, but we're getting an error down here. So this is something else we're going to have to fix. It says right here, variable player of falling object script not assigned. So if I go to this falling object script and I look in here, you notice that player is not there. And that's because when I made my prefab down here and dragged copies out, it did not get the connection that I made with that original falling object. See, in the original falling object, the player is here. That's because I dragged the player into the slot here from the hierarchy. So now that we have multiples, they're not just automatically going to get that. So we either are going to have to select each falling object and drag that in, which we could do as long as we're not going to add more falling objects anywhere in our game, or we could actually go into the script and have the script do this assignment here. So instead of doing it out here in the inspector, we'd have the script do it. So let me show you how to do that in the script, so that if we decide to like spawn in more falling objects, like if we do another level and we want to make it tougher, we don't have to do all that by hand there out in the inspector. So in the falling object script here, we have the variable for the player, and right now we're assigning that out in the inspector. But we could, right here at the beginning, we could actually find the player and store in our player variable. Alright, and to do that we would do a command here. It's called GameObject.Find. So we would say player, we'd set that equal to, we'd say GameObject.Find, and we can either find him by name or we can find him by tag. So I think what we're going to do is since we do have a tag on him, we're going to go to do this one here, the find game object with tag. Pay attention to the fact that there is a find game objects with an S with tag. That one gives us an array of game objects. So if I actually have more than one player in here, like maybe it was a two-player game and I had two people sharing the screen here, maybe I want to get both of them. But I only have one, so I want to make sure I just get one game object. Okay, so you see it's going to get me just one object that has the tag that we specify. So I'm going to select that one, and then in the parentheses here I have to give it a tag as a string. The tag on the player is capital P player, And what this will do is it'll go out, it'll find the game object with this tag, it will return that game object, and then since this is a game object variable, I'm able to store the game object that it returns. So this will find my player game object, I'll store it here under player, and now that'll be assigned automatically, and I shouldn't get that error out there in the inspector anymore. So let's save this, let's go back out to Unity, let's clear out our errors down here, and when I hit play here, I'm going to pause now. If I click through my falling objects, you notice now how they all have this player object filled in. So that's because when they first started their script, one of the first things they did was go out and find the player and store him in there. So now, if I get hit, we get the explosion, I lose a life. If I shoot them, then they explode and I get score and I don't have that error anymore. Okay? So now we have multiple falling objects. We made some adjustments for what we had to do to change things so that it would work correctly with multiple objects. And now I'm free just to drag as many of these out here as I want, or if I want to just instantiate a bunch of them at the very beginning, I could do that using a loop. One other thing we're going to do here is we're just going to position these objects up off the top of the screen, because when the game starts, I don't want to have any falling objects currently falling, so or currently on screen. And we can give a little variety here to their pattern that they fall in by dragging them some higher and some lower to the screen. So maybe we can kind of set up up here above kind of a pattern that we want them to start in. So that we have a little variety, and if I hit play now, they'll start coming down the screen, and that kind of starts us off a little bit more organically, I guess, with a little more variety as they come on down. Okay, so now as we continue to mess with this, we'll just be thinking about balance. You know, is there enough objects? Is the challenge high enough? Things like that. But we've got our multiple objects in here. We've cleaned up a few things so that they work correctly. The other thing I want to do in this video is talk a little bit about managing our assets here. You'll notice that I have quite a few things right now in my asset folder here, my main folder. And as we add more things, it gets more and more messy. So part of what you want to do is get good at organizing your folders. So in your assets folder here, you can actually right click it and you can create a folder. And inside of that folder, we could, for instance, we could say this is for all of our sounds. So I can make a sounds folder, and then I could grab all my sounds and I can just drag and drop them into that folder. So now all my sounds are over here in this sounds folder. Okay, I can make another one. I could also right click right here in the asset panel, say create folder, and I can make one for my prefabs. And I can drag my bullet into there, and I could even select two of these by just holding down the shift key or the control key and drag them up there. So now all my prefabs are in the prefabs folder, and this will just make it neater for us. I think I'll probably drag the game audio into my sounds because that makes sense. I can have also a folder for my scripts. So again, just click here, create folder, scripts, and then I can just go here and drag all my scripts into that folder, and now my my asset panel is much neater and cleaner. Everything will still just sync up and run just fine because Unity keeps track where everything is. It doesn't affect my gameplay. Alright, so there we go. Got our multiple falling objects, took care of a few issues, and cleaned up our asset panel a bit. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Look for the next one, which is where we're going to start learning how to do UI, the user interface, where we put the labels and the text and things on the screen so the player can actually know what's going on, see how many lives he has, see what score is, and all of that. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, leave comments below if you have any questions or you have any ideas. I'd be happy to see them. Thank you for watching.